Okay. Tiana, welcome. I am so excited to talk with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Megan. So
It's
excited.
so fun. So Tiana and I knew each other in a very different life, right? Yeah, I forget how many years ago it was, but we both worked in admissions at Maryland, and you sort of still work in admissions, but we're kind of going to talk about other stuff today. And I now work in philanthropy in Florida, so this is so much fun. But you are in the admissions office. But what we're like really talking about today is sports and what you're doing with that. So can you talk a little bit, maybe give like your day job and then like what you're actually doing in the sports world?
Yeah, for sure. So my day job, I am the director for on-campus programs at American University in Washington, D.C. And basically, I oversee the campus visit experience. That is my job. So our admissions welcome center, we welcome about 30,000 visitors to campus every year, and it's my job to make sure that every single one of those visitors have a memorable time on our campus. I supervise all of our tour guides that are on our staff, and I basically oversee anything that's kind of a first touch point that someone would have with us, whether that's the visit. I manage our call center and then kind of the general admissions inbox that we have over email as well. So um,
Yeah,
I've
that's a
been at
big job.
AU. Yeah, we met at Maryland. You
Yeah.
met me when I was fresh out of college. It's
Yeah.
just wild to think about. Um, but I've been at AU for, I think it's been 10 years now. So
Nice.
yeah, yeah.
Nice. AU's like such an amazing school. I'm a little biased to where it's located because I used to live near there in DC. It's a beautiful area. And that's a big enough job and interesting enough that we could talk about. But what do you do when you're not having a wonderful first experience for families at AU?
Yeah, so my side hustle, I am on the scorers table for a couple of the colleges in this area. So I started out working the scorers table at American University, George Washington University, Georgetown, George Mason, and then for the last 8 years, I'm also on the scorers table for the Washington Wizards and the Washington Mystics here in DC, which is really exciting. So
That's so exciting. And so you're saying the scores table. Tell us what that is.
yeah, so the scorers table, if you're watching any basketball game from home, you look at center court, there are a table of individuals. Usually it's anywhere from like 6 to 8 people. And we are the people that help the game flow. So that could be the scoreboard operator. It could be the official scorer. So that person is kind of noting what's happening with like points and fouls and keeping track of like important statistics, the game clock operator, the shot clock operator, and then the team of statisticians. So,
Wow.
um,
Very cool.
yeah, yeah.
So did you grow up loving basketball? Like, how did you I have a lot of questions. Like, how did you decide to do this for basketball, or was there like an entree into it?
Yeah. So in a Zoom setting, no one can actually see how tall I am, but I'm a very short individual. I'm 5'1". But I grew up playing basketball like as a kid. I'm from the state of Maryland, so I grew up doing, rec league basketball in Montgomery County. And I don't know if it's still the case, but you were allowed to legally start working at the age of 13. And my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, she also played basketball. And it was during one of her games that the person who does the scorebook didn't show up. And so they were looking for like volunteers in the stands to keep track of score. And because I played, I was like, oh yeah, I can totally figure this out. And so I kept the book for one of her games. And the individual I worked with worked for the county and was like, how old are you? And would you be interested in, working every weekend? And so I started out at the age of 13, just doing the scorebook or like the flip chart of the score for the rec league games. When I got to high school, I played 1 year of JV basketball. And then after that, I quit. I knew I wasn't going to make varsity, but I still wanted to be really involved. And so I stayed on and did the shot clock
Hmm.
for at the time girls basketball didn't have shot clock, but boys basketball did. So I did the shot clock for the boys basketball games and kept the book for either team whenever they had asked for it, because it was the same exact book from the rec league. um and that's kind of like how it all started, truly. And when I got to college, I knew that I wanted to study sports journalism. What a lot of people don't know is, so I went to American University. That's where I did my undergrad. I actually commuted from home, so I didn't live on campus.
Ah,
Um, it's hard to make friends when you're not living on a college campus. I mean, you know that as, someone who's worked in admissions. It's a tough part of college if you're a commuter student.
yeah,
And so when I was in college, I just kind of had the mindset of like, what are ways that I can get involved that keep me on campus, kind of all day. Um, and I forgot to mention, in high school, I also managed the football team. I
nice.
kept track of quarterback stats. And so when I got to AU, I figured, let me get involved with basketball in some way.
Yeah,
Um, I met a girl on my club softball team that was the manager for the men's basketball team at AU. And I had told her like, hey, I did this stuff in high school, like I'd be interested in joining. And she got me an interview with one of the coaches, and kind of the rest was history. And that is truly how it started. And there's no way that I would be working in the capacity that I do right now if it was not for me being a manager in college,
yeah,
like for sure. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And what do you love about basketball?
It's just such an exciting sport. I think it's fast paced. I like when it gets chippy. I think that's, it's exciting, and the amount of conditioning and, the actual like physical ability, um, like what the athletes have to do to train to be this good. I think a lot of people underestimate it. But more than anything, the atmosphere. Like a lot of the
Yeah,
games that I work, my favorite part about them is just the atmosphere, whether it's the team itself, whether it's their fans and their kind of like home game experiences. But it's like the sport of basketball, I feel like has an amazing atmosphere regardless of kind of where you are, who's playing. Everyone's kind of playing at 100% or more.
mhm.
Um, it's just that intensity, like that high pressure environment is just so much fun to kind of like be around and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like one of the things that I love about basketball, and I love sports. Like I will watch anything. I am the person that like during the Olympics is watching everything. But I love that it's so accessible too. Like the culture of basketball is like pickup, and it doesn't have to be in a super fancy facility. And then at the highest levels, like it is so beautiful when you see basketball being played by professionals. Like it is just, it's next level. It's so cool. Um, so I get that. And the experience piece, you're like totally in the right role at AU. Like that experience piece is something that
Yeah.
you love. That's really cool to, connect those sort of pieces together. So you were the manager at AU, and then did you go directly into the other colleges and running for them or no?
So, I started out with AU. So, my freshman year at AU, that it was me and the female manager that brought me on, and she was a senior. And then my last 3 years, I was the only female manager. Like that was part of our crew. And as a female, there's a lot of responsibilities for being a team manager that you can't do. There's a lot of work that happens in the locker room
Mm,
that I was not able to do. And so where I was able to bring value to the team was during practices and outside of practices. So a lot of the times I would keep score, I would run the clock, I would do shot clock. Like anytime we did live kind of gameplay during practice, I was the one that kind of facilitated the scoring and the timing of it. Um, and so when I graduated, the person who's the facilities manager at American who hires the scorers table, he had known me as a manager all throughout college and was like, hey, I know you know how to do these
Yes.
jobs.
Yeah.
Would you be interested, like if you're staying in the area, would you be interested in working our games? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Why not? You know, it's a great way to make some extra money. I knew I still wanted to like come back and watch games as an alum. So like what better way than to come work a game, have the best seats in the house, and watch a team that I loved. And so I would say the first 2 years I really just like worked AU games, and with my job at Maryland, I was able to kind of like leave College Park and drive back into DC and work those 7 o'clock games. Um, and then the scorers table world is a very like small world. There's not a lot of people that, do these jobs. And so the next school became GW, and the only reason that I was connected with them was that their person who hires their table reached out to the guy at American and was like, hey, do you recommend people? Like, we're short staffed this season. Um, so I got linked up with them. I started working their games. And it basically kind of was like a trickle effect, to be honest. I did my master's degree in sports management at Georgetown. And at the time, back then, the Georgetown table was staffed only by alums. Like it was like this very like
Oh.
tough table to break into. And when I finished, it's a sports industry management program. We call it the SIM program for short. When I finished the SIM program, like immediately I got connected to someone at Georgetown that was like, we need people to work our table. Like we've heard about you. Would you be willing to come in and do our games? And
Yeah.
I mean, to go from like Patriot League basketball to the Atlantic 10 to then the Big East is like the quality of basketball is also very different, and the games are more intense as well. It's
Mhm.
kind of like the notoriety of the conference, basically. Um, and then from Georgetown, kind of same thing with George Mason, like that. None of these individuals, I never reached out to them. And that's
Mhm.
not me bragging in any way.
No.
It is like, that's kind of how that network is just, it's so small that they reach out to one another and, hey, can you recommend someone, like someone reliable who knows what they're doing? And I've just kind of said yes to everyone.
Yeah.
Um, so there was a time, probably like 3, 4 years ago, there was a time where I was working 120 plus games a season. I was doing college basketball, women's college basketball. When I started doing the NBA and the Mystics, like it was kind of getting out of control. And when I got married a couple years ago, I started to scale back because I was working games like 4 or 5 nights a week.
Yeah, that's a third of the
Yeah.
year. Like that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, like today, I am like this season for college, I'm only doing Georgetown games and George Mason games. Because I did cut back more.
Mhm.
And then I've kind of fully committed to the Wizards,
Mhm.
and the Mystics. So the Wizards are kind of like my top priority. They get
Mhm.
first dibs on my calendar. And so I will try to work every home game, and the ones that I can't, it's overlap with my full-time job.
Yeah.
And then the colleges I fill in kind of
Yeah.
after that.
What's so interesting about this is that I would have thought like the NCAA would hire or the NBA hire, like it feels like there would be a central pool for the arenas, not like the individual organizations reaching out.
Yeah. There's some places that do have like it's like a pool of people for everything. So
Hmm.
What's really cool is like through these experiences, I've gotten to meet people that do this in other cities. And like, I know, for example, in Philadelphia, like they have a group and it's those individuals do Sixers games, those individuals do the Temple games. Like anytime there's a major tournament that comes to Philly, like they're the ones that that group gets tapped first. And it's like I don't know if it's a like a third party company or who it is, but they're a small group and they're kind of contracted out for like all of their basketball events.
Mm.
Whereas for me, it is by the team, by Monumental Sports, um, for the pro stuff. And so it's
Yeah.
all separate entities.
Yeah. It seems like it's a stressful job. Do
It's
you
not
find it
stressful.
stressful or no? I mean, like the scoring part doesn't seem that stressful. Like that seems very straight ahead. But like the shot clock and the timing, like that feels like I don't know if it's so much stressful, but like you probably have to watch the game in a different
Yeah.
way. How did you adjust to that? I mean, you've been doing it for a
Yeah.
long time, but
I think because I've been around it for so long, I'm kind of numb to the like emotions around it. I mean, when I was a team manager, like we weren't supposed to react. Like our players were reacting, but we were kind of like staying neutral, just trying to
Mhm.
support the team. Um, and then kind of like the first like rule of being on the scorers table is that you can't show bias at all. So, you know, to come and work AU games, you would think like, okay, she went to AU, she was part of the team at AU, like she's going to be gung ho for AU. And it's, you just have to like suppress all of those emotions. Um, so I think over the years I've kind of like truly become numb to it. And I
Mhm.
just, you know, even now when I try to go to games as a fan, you will never hear me cheering. Like I will never criticize a referee. The like you will see me clapping and like
That's
that's
it.
about the extent of it. But it's not stressful. I think it's, you know, I think that you build this sense of confidence of like, you know what you're doing, they've hired you for a reason. You are human, so like mistakes happen. I still make a mistake every season, and
Sure.
that's natural. But it's like not letting that get to you. Over the years, I've, you know, built a thick skin, and you know, you'll have coaches, players, you know, referees yelling at you, but for the most part, I think kind of like my mindset when I work games isn't like, okay, I'm not going to mess up today. It's just like, I hope this is a good game. And you
Mhm.
get sucked into it that, you know, doing the shot clock, it's one of the hardest jobs to do. Because the learning of like the rules of the shot clock is very complicated. But like once you have it down, it's actually my favorite position to do because it's one of the few where like you're literally your job is to watch the game. You watch the game, you're not gonna make a mistake.
Yeah.
And your job is to follow the ball. Like that is what the shot clock is. And so I love doing that job because I can be engulfed and sucked into the game. Oftentimes, I won't know until a timeout what the score is of a game if I'm doing shot clock because I'm so focused on
So
watching gameplay. So I would say like it used to be stressful starting out in the first like, you know, year or so, but you get so used to it that those types of jobs, um, kind of like become second nature. Like I could have
mhm.
this conversation with you right now, watching a game and doing shot clock. And I would,
Really?
yeah.
Wow, that is amazing. That's amazing. So I'm gonna ask you later, not now, like how are you managing to like very big things at the same time? But I think you might have just answered it. So that is so interesting. And like with the NBA, um, did you have to change and adjust at all? Or like, see when you were saying like going from Patriot to
Yeah.
Big Ten, or not Big Ten, I'm sorry. The
A10.
big, was it Big Ten? Pac
Atlantic 10. No, I would
Atlantic 10.
love to do Big 10. I
It's
would
what
love
is
to
it?
get on a Maryland table.
Yeah, okay. Well, like if Damon Evans is listening to this, because I know he is,
Yeah.
President Pines, I got somebody for you. But no, so like when you're going up in the different conferences and the
Yeah.
level of play, did you find that there was an adjustment to the NBA as well?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And what
Um,
was that learning curve?
it was huge because when I was in college, like I didn't follow the NBA as religiously as I follow it now. Like because I was so engulfed in college basketball, um, I wasn't watching it as frequently. I grew up a Wizards fan.
Nice.
And I grew up in this area. Like the Washington Wizards are my team. I love them so much. I won a contest with them when I was in high school. Like my like ties to just my, how much the team means so much to me,
Yeah.
run so deep, but it was a huge learning curve because the rules of the NBA are different.
Hmm.
Um, I would say that the opportunity to work an NBA table is so rare.
Yeah.
One
Like,
of my colleagues, the analogy that she made that like sticks with me is that working the table at the NBA is like being on the Supreme Court. So like the only time a space opens up is if someone dies. Like
yeah.
it is so hard to kind of break into that world. And I was just so fortunate that um, the scoreboard operator 8 seasons ago, he left. And from, the kind of like what people have told me is that the person that was responsible for the table at the time had reached out to a couple individuals asking for recommendations of, replacements. Um, the scoreboard system at Capital One Arena is a system that if there's a college basketball tournament that was hosted in the arena, it's the same system. And so I will say that, the fact that I worked the ACC men's basketball tournament and the Big Ten tournament in DC and worked that system specifically did play to my advantage. And so when they had asked individuals like, hey, do you guys know anyone who's familiar with this system? My name was thrown out. And so, like, I had no idea that the Wizards had an opening. Someone had reached out and was like, we got your information. They asked me to come for a preseason game to be the scoreboard operator to kind of like try me out. I will tell you in like the weeks leading up to that game, the amount of NBA games I watched, they sent me like a photo of what the scoreboard system, like what it was, and I had already used it before, but I would literally like sit at home, watch a game, and like pretend that I was scoring it. Read up on the rules, just kind of like did everything that I could to make sure that I made a good kind of first impression that they would invite me back. Um, and so, yeah, the kind of to go back to the root of your question, like the learning curve is it's bigger than you think. Like a lot of people just think, okay, I watch basketball at home, like I know the rules, I know the game, like I'll be fine. Yeah, you know the game, but you have no idea the intricacies of the things that you need to keep track of. Like the way that the NBA does fouls is very different than college basketball. Their timeouts are going to be different. So like, yeah, scoring is the same, but also if you get distracted for a second, I mean, the NBA is a much faster pace
Mhm.
than some college basketball teams. And so you can miss a basket, you can miss a free throw, and as a scoreboard operator, what you're putting up is what everyone in the arena is seeing. So that also includes the coaches, the players, the referees, and the fans. And so it's one of those things where like if you make a mistake, that's one of the mistakes that everyone, all 20,000 people know that you just messed up the score,
Yeah.
or that you missed a foul or whatever. So
Yeah. Did you have any like nerves that first game, or were you confident, or
um,
both?
I was I was pretty nervous.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if we'll talk about this at all or not, but I mean, like it's the NBA, it's a very male dominated industry, and so um, coming in, thankfully they have one woman who's been there for a long time, and she's one of my mentors, and I love her to death. Um, but coming into it, I mean, it's intimidating. Like,
Hmm.
again, this idea of it's really hard to even like get an opportunity to be invited to work a game, and then on top of that, you don't want to mess up. I trust myself. I know that, there's a reason that they asked me to come. If they didn't think that I could do it, I would have never been asked to come. Um, but I will say, as a female, it does get to you when people make comments. Like, one of that first game that I did, um, one of the people that I was working with, and I won't say who, but someone that I was working with, was my first time meeting that individual. They pulled me aside like before the game started and kind of like gave me a pep talk and kind of like mansplained to me like the sport and what I'm doing that night. And
Yeah.
it was infuriating, but it was also intimidating, because one of the things that he said to me was, like, you're in the big leagues now, don't let, it was like, don't let the lights and like, the players like distract you. Like, you need to focus on the game. And, um, if you make a mistake, it's a reflection of the table. You need to be on your A game, like all this stuff. And I am very professional. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It
Like,
was,
can your
yeah,
little woman brain handle everything around?
yeah. It
And I
was
will
like,
say,
oh my God,
like,
yeah.
I think it's so hard, and I'm sorry to interrupt. It just
No,
like
you're good.
I think so many women have experienced this where you also can't tell, like, are you actually trying to be helpful or are you trying to be a jerk? Like, I can't tell what's happening, and now I'm just angry. Like,
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah. It was very infuriating. And I'll tell you, like, even now, some of the college basketball games, when I do shot clock, we used to have, before the pandemic, we used to have meetings with the referees in their locker room like 30 minutes before a game started. We would just kind of have like a pregame conversation. And the number of times a referee would say to me, like, have you done shot clock before? And every time I wanted to be like, no, they found me on the street tonight. This is my first game. Like, what is basketball? And it's just no female referees asking me that. Like, no one else is asking me. And I know, like, you're refereeing the game. You want to make sure like we know what we're doing. But it used to just get to me so much that I'm like, man, like every freaking week I'm on shot clock and someone is being like, is this your first time doing this? Like, no, like, come on.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, that game for the Wizards, like getting that pep talk, it was, I don't think it made me more nervous. It was more like this, I don't want to say reality check, but like not a gut punch. I don't know what the word is, but just like, yeah, you are now in this like truly male dominated world. You got to figure out how to hold your own,
yeah,
kind of situation. Of like, it kind of just in my mind was like, okay, you're gonna experience this. Um, Figure out a way to kind of like toughen up and stick up for yourself.
yeah. I think it's toughen up, stick up for yourself, don't take it personally, but also don't lose who you are.
Yeah,
And you feel this added pressure of like, I can't screw up, even though it's completely normal to make a
yes,
mistake. It's like, it's there's so many added layers to it. And like for people that are listening that can't see Tiana, like you're a beautiful woman and you also have like a younger face, so I'm sure people are looking at you and are like, oh, is this like a 16-year-old, 10 years ago or whatever.
yeah.
And it's like it's just it's I think most women have experienced this, and you probably experienced it double because you're 5'1", you're
Yep.
beautiful, you look young. Yeah, and it's not like you want a contest to do this for the evenings.
Right.
It's
It's so
crazy.
funny. And I've had people like question credentials, like ask me how long I've been doing it, or if I get invited to do a tournament, it's like, well, who do you know that asked you to do it? And it's like, why can't you just believe that I'm actually better than you at this position, and
Yeah,
that's why I was asked to come in and do it. It has
right.
nothing to do with me being pretty. It has nothing to do with who I know. It is truly based off of like, hey, I've built a great reputation for myself. I'm credible. I'm professional. they know I am emotionless on the table. Like I am someone that you can rely on, that I'm gonna come and work. And if I make a mistake, I'm the first person to acknowledge it and apologize immediately. Whereas like
Yeah.
I have worked with men for years now, when a mistake happens, the immediate like, oh, it's the equipment, or oh, someone was talking to me and they like, the fact that like most men will not accept responsibility for a mistake, and almost 9 out of 10 times will find a reason to place blame on why that mistake was made. I truly pride myself in, I will never make an excuse if I make a mistake, because I know I made it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what caused it, but I will literally at the next dead ball, I will personally apologize to those referees and be like, I'm sorry, that was my bad. That was on
Hmm.
me and I know it. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that that says a lot about kind of like who I am, and that reputation I have with these teams, is that, it is a gut punch to me if I make a mistake, but they
Of
happen.
course.
Like
Yeah.
it happens, it's part of the game. It is a human component that you've brought into it. And so it's natural that those things are going to happen. But if you're making a mistake, if you were distracted or something like that, that's, those are things that shouldn't be happening. But
Yeah. And I think we learn so much from our mistakes, and the fact that you acknowledge it and own it and, you know, apologize when you need to or whatever. Ultimately, what you're saying is like, I acknowledge this happened and I'm changing my behavior for it instead of like pushing back and finding some excuse for it. We could probably talk about that. That's like a totally different podcast, but it drives me nuts. Like, I feel like, at least in the culture that I experience, I
yeah.
hear a lot about like DEI hire. Oh, they're a DEI hire. And I'm like, what you don't understand? And I'm a white woman, right? Like, I have a lot of privilege built in, but like, when you are especially working in male dominated spaces, you have to work so much harder. And it is so insulting when it's like, you literally don't think that I'm qualified. Like, that's what you're saying, is
Yeah.
like, I'm just not qualified. And it's infuriating when you know it's not only am I qualified, I'm overqualified. And I've had to be. And I can't even get upset about this. Like, I can't even be upset
Right. And
because
that's the hard part about sports, especially, is like as a female, there's so many of us that's like, your natural reaction is like, well, no one should be talking to me like this. Or if someone, even some of like the sexism that you like,
Mhm.
the sexist comments that you experience, it's one of the industries that it's so hard to actually speak up, because if you do, it's like, okay, well, you're the problem because you're shaking things up, will replace you.
Mhm.
Whereas most teams, or, whoever, it's not, let's remove the person who's making the comments and making people feel uncomfortable. It's, we're going to remove the person who actually vocalized it and like brought it to our attention. So it's tough as a female, especially. It's this like struggle of, it's the idea of like picking your own battles. It's like, is
Yeah.
this a comment where I'm actually going to snap and say something at this individual today? Or am I
Yeah.
just going to take this and just kind of like, take it with a grain of salt and move about
Yeah.
my day?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard. And this is your passion and dream. And like,
Yeah.
you don't want to infringe upon that. So it's got to be hard to know when to speak up and when not to. And I will say, like, I don't know about the NBA, I don't know about men's sports in general, but I think in general it's getting better. Like,
Yeah.
I think in general we're seeing progress, but there's still lots of room.
Always room for improvement.
So much room for us to just,
Yeah.
um be curious about other people and not
Yeah.
not come in with preconceived notions about qualifications.
It's a
So
very diplomatic way to put
yeah,
it.
that it's we all have room for growth. I know I certainly do. But so you're in the NBA, you're working for like the Wizards and the Mystics, and I have seen you travel. So so we've been in like Capital One Arena the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, how when did the travel component start?
So the first travel component, it started, I think it was the second year I started working Georgetown games. So every, like around the holiday season, most college basketball teams will pay or be asked to enter like holiday tournaments. And so probably like the most famous ones people would know is like the Battle for Atlantis, and that's in the Bahamas. There's a Maui Invitational in Hawaii. And so my second season with Georgetown, Patrick Ewing was the coach. He is of Jamaican descent. And Jersey Mike's hosted a tournament called the Jersey Mike's Jamaica Classic, and that was in Montego Bay, Jamaica. And in Ewing's second season, Georgetown actually signed up to participate in that tournament. And I guess because Jamaica is closer to DC, they invited the Georgetown scorers table to staff that tournament. And that's truly like how it started.
Cool.
I went in that first season, that first year doing it. They invited me to do the official book. And so I was happy to do that. And that was the first taste of like international or any sort of travel for this work that I got. And it was fun. I mean, it's long days.
Yeah.
A lot of these tournaments, I mean, it's 3, 4 games in a day. So you're at the arena at 10 a.m. and you're there until, close to midnight. Um, but
And the concentration, like the
yeah,
concentration that you have to have for that amount of time is exhausting, I'm sure.
yes, some places don't feed you well. Like the number of times like I'm packing my own snacks, I'm packing like water and all this stuff. It's also it's a lot. They're very long days. So for 2 back-to-back years, I did the Jamaica Classic. During the pandemic, they went on a hiatus, and then kind of the year after everything kind of like opened up. I did it for the third time, and then they've unfortunately kind of stopped the tournament. Um, but in I think it was in 2019, the Wizards, I think it was my second season with the Wizards. Um, they were invited to play like the NBA London games. And typically if you are the home team, you bring your home table. And so we were elected as the home team. We played the New York Knicks. It was one game in London. But we were invited as the scorers table. And at that point, I was the regular scoreboard operator, was kind of like what I had been hired and brought on to do. Um, for that trip, we were on the team charter, which was like super
Cool.
cool. We did not stay at the same hotel. We were at the same hotel as the referees, so we were in completely different parts of the city. But it was such a cool experience to like represent the Wizards, to be, to like fly out with the team and kind of like have that moment where you felt part of the team was really cool. Um, they allowed us on one of the days, they had coordinated some like sightseeing for the players' families, and like the families of the coaches. And they allowed us, like they had spots in that tour. And so they allowed us to like, they're like, if you can get yourself to the hotel that we're at, like you can join our tour. And so it was really fun to kind of like, meet the families. Some of the Mystics players were on that trip. And so like to interact with, these individuals outside of like Capital One Arena where you're like
Right.
professional and you're not supposed to like go up and talk to them, was just like a really nice, like humanizing experience. And then after the London games, I don't remember what year it was, but someone from Team USA like reached out to me and, same kind of thing. He had gotten my info from someone and asked if I was interested in becoming FIBA certified.
Mm.
I was like, sure, like, what's that process like? And ironically, what a lot of people don't know is that you actually have to get a certification to work international FIBA competitions, which like I haven't had to do any of that for like college basketball or the NBA. Um,
But it makes sense when
yeah,
you think about
yeah.
it. It makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And I mean, when you think about it, it's also this idea of like in the United States, the way that we play basketball is completely different than the rest of the world, which is on brand for the US to begin with. But like when you think about
Yeah,
competitions like the Olympics, if it's not in the US, and even, you know, when it's been in the US, they play by FIBA rules. They're not playing NBA rules. And
right.
FIBA rules are very different than NBA rules. And so, you know, I had to do a online like learning module. So it spent a couple hours every Saturday kind of going through little courses and doing quizzes. And the FIBA certification for the scores table, you have to take an exam. So it's like I think it's like a 50, 75 question exam. Um, and you have 2 attempts at it. You have to get 75% of the questions correct. So I was like, yeah, well, I'll do it. Why not? So I spent a summer studying and learning the FIBA rules, took the exam, passed. And then Team USA did a couple AmeriCup qualifiers in DC. And so that individual who had reached out, since I did the certification, I was now eligible to work those games. And so I did 2 of those games here in DC, and then that led to traveling to Orlando and doing the qualifier games there, which was before the FIBA tournament that was in the Philippines, right before the Olympics. Um, so like that was awesome to like, you know, working Team USA stuff. I feel like it's just like the sense of pride that you have of just like, oh, now you're like representing the country. Again, like not a lot of people are doing this. It's just, it's so cool.
No one, Tiana, no one's doing this. It's so
uh,
cool.
and it was so cool because the other people I got, like the people I met through that were the people that work for other NBA teams. So it's like now I'm getting to meet people from other teams, and like I get to hear about like their scores table drama and like how their games are going and all this stuff. And it's like, oh my God, their table is just like ours. And like, oh, you have this kind of character on your table. Like we have the same exact kind of person. And so like that part of it is super cool. So yeah, that was, you know, that was the Orlando opportunity. And then I was like, okay, I probably won't hear from Team USA like for a while. Um, I when I went to London, there was an individual who was like a third party contractor that the NBA hired. I like met him for like 5 minutes, and he like staffs tables for certain tournaments. So he staffs the statisticians at the NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. And so 2 years ago he reached out to me, and I, you know, was like, yeah, we met in London. I'm looking for people to come to Vegas to do Summer League. Like, would you be willing to come for 2 weeks? And I was like, I can't leave my job for 2 weeks, but I can come for a week. And it was through like doing that for him to kind of see my work ethic, to see, you know, get to know me as a professional. A lot of the travel I've done since then are opportunities that I've gotten through him. So I went to Madrid last year for the preseason. The Dallas Mavericks were playing Real Madrid. In Madrid, Spain. And when the Mavericks acquired Luka Doncic, they acquired him from Real Madrid, and Mark Cuban had kind of promised the owners that we will bring Luka back. Like one day we will bring him back. And so this was kind of a way for the Mavericks to keep that promise and to host a preseason game, kind of on a global
Yeah.
stage. And I don't know exactly like how it happened, but basically the Mavericks didn't have their official scorer with them. And so I was asked to fly out and be the official scorer. And, you know, like that. I was like, yeah,
That's so cool.
absolutely. It's
Yeah.
super cool. Um, and then this past summer, instead of going to Vegas for a second summer in a row, because of the Olympics and Team USA doing showcases in London and Abu Dhabi, I was asked if I would be interested to going to either one of those countries. Um, uh, and kind of like if I had a preference between one or the other.
Yeah.
If you can't tell by my name, I'm Middle Eastern. I've never been to the Middle East. And so the opportunity to go to Abu Dhabi was like a no-brainer for me. And so I had said like I would prefer to do that trip, but
Mhm.
um, I'm very low maintenance when it comes to these games. I like what job I do. It's for me, it's just grateful for the opportunity, happy to do whatever, happy to go wherever. Um, and so I don't think that I was his first choice for Abu Dhabi, but I do think that the UAE is a country where like maybe not a lot of Americans are like excited about going there. Whereas if you're given the choice to go to London, like you might be a little bit more excited about that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, yeah, Middle East, like count me in. So
Yeah. And also, like, from the East Coast, it's fairly easy to get to London. Not, I
yes,
mean,
yes,
so like you'd been
I've
if
been,
you wanted to, it's like a 6 hour flight. Like it's not it's
yeah.
not yeah.
So yeah, I was like, yeah, I'll go. I was able to bring my sister and my husband with
Ah,
me. We flew out 3 days before like the asked arrival date. And so we were able to do some sightseeing and then I worked 3 games in Abu Dhabi. And it was all Olympic teams. So it was like I did Team USA stuff, and I think like what a lot of people don't realize is that that FIBA stuff, none of the players on that team were players on the Olympic team. Like these are, college, like former college athletes, pro athletes that you don't really see in the NBA, but these are the individuals that are the reason why like Team USA has made it to the Olympics. And then it's like you get to the Olympics and it's like, okay, we're changing the roster. We're bringing in all these NBA guys.
wait, explain that.
I don't really understand how it works. Like,
This
I
seems
will
like a
preface
gimme
it,
gotcha.
it is crazy to me, but every Team USA game I worked up until going to Abu Dhabi, it was a completely different roster. I think they kept 2 or 3 guys like on the Olympic roster, and I think if you go and look, like you'll see their names on it, but it's like these athletes that you don't see them in the NBA. You probably heard about them like when they were in college, and they're the ones that play in these qualifier matches. Like you don't see LeBron
Okay,
playing in
this
a
makes
qualifier
sense.
match,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. This makes sense. So I'm assuming, I mean, like I need to look at this, but I'm assuming all of those players, the NBA players, are on the roster, but they're not playing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Yeah,
yeah,
because they're playing in the NBA and
yeah.
college
There's no way.
players are
Yeah.
playing in college. Like it's
It's
interesting.
very interesting. I don't know how it works. I don't know the rules behind it, but like the games that I worked in the US that were like Team USA qualifying matches were completely different rosters than when I went to Abu Dhabi and it was the 2 weeks before the Olympics started. Like we're, getting some like basically like preseason games in.
Wow.
Um, but that trip was incredible because it was the Team USA roster and we were at the hotel with the team. We, you know, we would be down in the breakfast like buffet area and we would see a player come down like with his family and just to like those things for me I'm never going to go up to them and bother them.
No, no, no.
But like to be able to kind of like see them. What's so funny,
You're
my
just like casually having breakfast with LeBron, like
he
whatever.
never came down to
Yeah,
breakfast.
yeah, okay.
My sister, she doesn't follow basketball at all. Um, she like if we were walking on the street and she saw a player, she'd have no idea who they are. So we would be at breakfast. There was one morning we are like down at breakfast, and Drew Holiday is down there with his family, and she doesn't see him, but Drew Holiday is married to Lauren Holiday. My sister is a huge soccer fan, and she's like, what's Lauren Holiday doing here? Like, oh my God, like that is it's Lauren Holiday. And I was like, do you not know who she's married to?
I love it.
And she had no idea who he was, and she was so excited to see Lauren. And I was just like, this is funny. This is so funny. Um, but so yeah, in Abu Dhabi, I did USA versus Serbia, USA versus Australia, and then I worked Serbia versus Australia as well. So 3 matches.
Cool.
Um, and I was a statistician for those matches, which was kind of easier because I didn't have to like use my FIBA brain too much.
Yeah. And then what did you do? I'm just curious. Like, what did you do in your personal time in Abu Dhabi? What were the highlights for you?
So my sister is an amazing like excursion finder. So when we arrived in Abu Dhabi, the next day, we took an Uber to Dubai, which is like an hour and hour and a half away.
Okay.
And she had hired a private like tour guide for
Mhm.
8 hours who took us around Dubai because we were like, we were only gonna have one day to do this. And so it was one night, we did one night in Dubai.
Cool.
So she like hired this guy who like met us when we arrived, and he took us to all of the main things to see. So we went to the Burj Khalifa. We went to a bunch of the like supermarkets. We went to the Dubai Frame. Um, he covered so much in those eight
Wow.
hours. And then the second day, when we were going to go back to Abu Dhabi, she booked us like a water taxi cruise. And we basically saw Dubai from water. So
Yeah.
it was like we were responsible for our own boat. And we had like a guide in his own separate boat, and we just like followed him around for 2 hours. And that was like super cool. And then in Abu Dhabi, we like the mall culture in the UAE is really big.
Mhm.
So like we went to like the biggest malls in those areas. But in Abu Dhabi, she booked us a sand duning excursion. So like a the tour guide came and picked us up at like six in the morning. He drove us about an hour into the middle of the desert, and we did, I think it's called sand bashing,
Mhm.
where he like basically like takes his car through the sand dunes and was just like driving like a maniac. I get car sick very easily, not enjoy that experience at all. But they had the option to ride camels. I'm allergic to camels. But he took us to a camel farm. And then we did sandboarding.
How
So
did you find out you were allergic to camels?
the hard way.
The hard.
I'm allergic to like most animals, so
Got
I
it. Okay.
gave
Yeah.
up like horseback riding. But I didn't want to take that away from them. So I was like, if you guys
Totally.
want to do a camel ride, like I will be in the car and I will watch you and you do it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we try to do as much cultural stuff, and then family heritage, like our family's from Iran. I've never been to Iran, and one of the best things that my sister like going to Abu Dhabi was like kind of the closest that we will get to being to Iran.
Mhm.
And one of the things that my sister did was she scouted out authentic Persian restaurants in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And so like I had some of the best Persian food I've ever had on
Amazing.
that trip, which was really, really cool.
Amazing. Can Americans visit Iran right now or no?
Say that again?
Can Americans visit Iran or no?
I don't think so unless like you have approval
Oh,
from
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
Um,
a bummer. But it's cool that you got to, kind of have a
yeah,
tangential experience. Yeah,
yeah.
that's really neat. Very cool.
Yeah,
That's
so that was
awesome.
cool. And then just last week, that my last international trip, the Wizards participated in the Mexico City games, and so we played the Miami Heat this past Saturday in Mexico City. And so we were not on the team charter on this trip. But we were at the same hotel as the team, and uh, the NBA and like Monumental did organize like a really nice dinner for the support staff. And we got to go to a lucha libre, and it was we were there during Day of the Dead, so like it was a special Dia de los Muertos like fight. So like that was just, it was so cool to kind of go and do that. And the game itself, we lost, wasn't great, but just like to do 2 trips with the Wizards now,
Yeah,
awesome.
an amazing
Lifetime
experience.
experiences, yeah.
Yeah. And are the crowds internationally, are they as excited as American fans? Like, is basketball as popular internationally?
I feel like so the best crowd of all the trips I've been on was in Madrid. Like
Hmm.
that was incredible. I felt like I was at a soccer match.
Hmm.
And the announcer, I was talking to him, his background was announcing soccer matches. So I don't know if it was just like the way that he hyped the crowd up, that like people were jumping up and down in the stands, like waving flags, and like you really don't see that in the NBA. Um, but I would say like in Abu Dhabi and in Mexico, it was pretty like comparable. In terms of like fan energy, I think it like really depends on where you go, because there's
Hmm.
some like you see these videos in like Serbia, for example, of like some of those games, and they have like flares. It's like there's chants, like everyone, it, you feel like that was kind of the atmosphere I was hoping for, but it was pretty like pretty subdued.
Pretty,
I
yeah.
wanted more. It wasn't,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That don't, like you said, it sounds like a soccer, like football
yeah.
experience where I've never gone to a soccer match outside of the United States like I would love to, but I've had plenty of experiences where I'm like, oh, I'm in the wrong section. I think I'm gonna get hurt. It's like it's exciting, but I need to be in the non-flare section.
Yeah.
Um, that's really awesome. And so how are you managing your time? Like, how are you doing both of these things? And I guess the other question along with that is is this a full-time job or is it something that people do on the side?
Yeah. Time wise, the short answer is like I have no idea. I mean, truly, I would say like there's 2 very important people that like make this happen. The first is like my husband. I mean, he is so flexible, and before he married me, like he knew I was doing this. Um, we, 2 years of our relationship, we were long distance. And so those years where I was working 100+ games a season, like I was, if I was going home, I would just be doing nothing. And so
Right.
it's like, if I'm going to be at home and I'm going to be watching this game on TV, I might as well just be there. Um, but now I've been married for 3 years, and I've definitely like started to scale back because I feel guilty, like it there I it feels, I feel bad saying like, hey, I have 5 games this week, so I'm only going to see you like on Monday and Sunday. um I feel bad like being gone for that long. But I mean, Jesse's been so incredible. Like he never said you have to scale back. He's always been super supportive. And he gets to reap the benefits too. Like he can come to a Wizards game whenever he wants. All of these international trips, like he's had the option to come with me. He's joined me on some. And so like I think, he knows how important it is to me. And I think that I'm more mindful now that we're married of like, hey, I'll commit to games like 3 nights a week, but it's just not worth it, working for 6 teams and doing as much as I was doing. Um, I would say like, and then my boss at AU, I mean, like he's so flexible. He knows how important like these opportunities are. And so thankfully most games are at night. And so
Mhm.
like my work schedule, I work an 8 to 4 day so that I have the like buffer to make it to an arena. Um, But even when I need to ask for time off to work college basketball tournaments or like do these trips, he's never said no. And we could be in the busiest time of the year for admissions.
Mhm.
Um, he knows how important it is to me. And I think, I don't think that I would quit if he would say no, but like I think he also just knows, I do a good job at work. I've never demonstrated, at American that, hey, I'm slacking off here and I'm also asking for time off to like achieve these dreams. Um, so he's been so wonderful, and so supportive. And every time I email him and I'm like, hey, like I have another trip that came up, it's always just like, that is so cool. Like, yes, go. Um, so
That's amazing. And I think as a supervisor, I mean, you know this, like
yeah,
that could feel scary. So
yeah.
it's amazing that he sees that. And, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like you want to work harder because of it. Like you are more invested because of it.
If you saw the emails I send him, it's so funny because I'll be like for college basketball tournaments, usually those are like a whole week, right? So I'll be like, hey, on this day, I'm gonna be online for 3 hours and then I'm gonna log off at this time and then like work, like I'll be at the arena waiting for a game to start. I'm gonna like do a little bit of work. So he also knows that I'm not fully offline on those days. And it's like, to your point, it's like, I'm gonna try my best to make both work. And if that means like I need to show up to the arena at 8 a.m. so I can just log on and do a little bit of work and then, log off and like take
Yeah.
the PTO I need, I can do that. But like even in Vegas with the time change, I was like, I will wake up at 6 a.m. in Vegas and like I will log on and do work until, I need to leave to go to the arena.
Yeah.
That still allows me to still kind of like not slack off and not be completely offline for these like personal reasons.
Right. Right.
So yeah, he's so wonderful. And like I really, as a supervisor, I couldn't have asked for a more flexible person that's just like so supportive of these endeavors. Um, so I mean, those are like the fact that it works around my job is the big part. The only times I miss games are if we have events like advanced
Sure.
events, and those are just kind of like non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the admission cycle doesn't really overlap with the basketball
Yeah.
season. So yeah, usually like games that I miss for Wizards is just, these like random, like, oh, I'm at a conference for work,
Right.
or, we just have an admissions open house this day. Um, but yeah, and then the second part of your question was, my God,
Well, actually, before you answer
yeah.
that, what's interesting is earlier we talked about how like being in a male dominated sport, you get talked down to or mansplained or whatever. And then the two people that you referenced in supporting you most are men. And like I think that's a beautiful thing,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
that's really cool. I mean, it could have been women and that would have been cool
Yeah.
too, but it was so nice to hear that you want to spend time with your husband. That's always a nice thing. And it's such a nice thing that like he loves you and knows that you love this. Like that's wonderful. And in the same way with your supervisor, like professionally, this is such a great thing for you. That's I think that's really it's two
And
people who see you. They're
yes,
not, that's amazing.
and he knows, I'm not trying to like leave the admissions world. And I think, a lot of people always ask me why don't you just go work full time in sports? And I think
Hmm.
if they had asked me that 10 years ago when I was like young and I was, at Maryland, I would have been like, yeah, that's the goal. Like the goal was always to work in an administrative office, either of like
Hmm.
a D1 school or, a professional team. But the really hard thing is that in higher ed and in admissions, I feel like I've also thrived in that industry and like I've done a pretty good job.
Yes.
And I've been able to like move up quicker than I would have expected. And one of my fears is that was that I didn't want to start over. Like
Hmm.
kind of climbed the higher ed ladder faster than I thought I would. And in sports, there's no like direct, okay, you're a director in higher ed, so you're going to be a director in the sports industry. Like you
Right.
can't do that. So the idea of starting over was also just like something that I was scared of. Um, and what I realized as I kind of like was around the industry more is that if I work full time in sports, whatever that role may be, then I can't do everything else. So
Yeah.
if I worked just for the Wizards, then I couldn't do the college basketball stuff. I couldn't do the FIBA stuff. And so I like that I have the flexibility to have a career that's like not sports related, but I get to scratch that sports itch and not have to limit it because of conflict of interest or, whatever. And
Yeah.
that part of it is also is nice. And people are like, well, don't you want to make money? And I don't do any of these games for money. Like it's so funny. People will ask, like, well, how much are you making per game? And I couldn't tell you because I don't check the pay stubs. Like to
Uh-huh.
me, if they don't pay me, I'm not hounding them and being like, hey, you never pay me for working this game. Like truly, I am grateful for the experience, the fact that I can be there, have the best seats in the house for like a good game. I don't care if I'm getting paid or not. Um, it's just like that fun part of it where it's like the money doesn't matter
Yeah.
because it's you're there for a couple hours. You get to see some incredible players like the people I've seen. It's so cool. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Who like so I did ask, I don't actually really care anymore, but like is it something that someone because like I mean you saying that is like, oh, it's amazing. I also am like, that's amazing, also pay her. But like could is is this a full-time job or is it always something in tandem with something else?
Not to be on a scores
Yeah,
table.
okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you like you could say that if you worked a game every night,
Hmm.
7 nights a week, basketball season's only a couple months a year.
Yeah.
So it's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
You could make a
So
couple thousand. It's not
it's not, yeah,
sustainable.
you're not doing it full time. Okay. And um, I mean that makes a lot of sense actually, you saying that. Like who are your favorite players, whether current or past? Like you saying Patrick Ewing alone, I'm like, oh my God, Patrick Ewing, like that was my childhood and like it's so cool.
Um, I mean, it's so hard because I try not to like fangirl. Like I truly
Hmm.
like I go to the arena and I'm like, okay, I don't care who's there,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
whatever. My first season with the Wizards, the first Lakers game I worked to see LeBron James up like that up close. It is crazy because it's completely different than what you see on TV. He is much larger than like you would ever imagine.
Yeah.
Um, and so, just like, I mean, he is the GOAT, like to see where he was when he started out and like, he's playing with his son now. Like I when we play the Lakers, like I'm gonna be so excited to just be able to be there and like witness that. Um what seeing Vince Carter, like seeing him finish out the last couple of years of his career, that was really special. Um I enjoy watching Steph Curry play. I think that like his energy and yeah, for me,
Night night.
yeah, like for me, it's so funny because when people ask like who are your favorite players, I also judge them based off of like who I think is a good person. Like
Hmm.
if they are good enough to be in the NBA, like that means that your skills are good. So I'm not gonna sit
Yes.
here and like analyze your skills. You're good enough to be in the NBA, whatever. I like to look at them as like, are you a good person in real life? Like, are you kind to the fans? Are you kind to the support staff? Are you kind to the people that are just like in the background that people don't think about?
Yeah.
And so I enjoy watching player interactions with like kids. Like I get really excited. One of my favorite players on the Wizards is a guy that rarely ever plays, and his name is Anthony Gill. He played at UVA.
Yeah.
I watched him in the ACC tournament when he played at UVA. But like he will go out of his way to take photographs with like young fans. He goes out of his way to high five them. He comes up to us and just like asks us like, "Hi, how are you doing today?" We're not supposed to talk to players. We're not supposed to seek them out, and so it's really nice for them to just come over and be like, "Thanks for being here tonight," you
Mhm.
know. But yeah, like so he's just like he's someone I really enjoy being around. Um, when Dwayne Wade, his last couple of years playing on Miami, like I loved working those games just to like be able to watch him play. Um, yeah. I mean, the Wizards team right now is like really young. Victor Wembanyama, like seeing the hype around him. Um, but yeah,
That's cool. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think I like that interaction piece because it is a recognition of all of, first of all, they've got like the best jobs in the world, right? Like you get to play a sport for a living,
yeah,
which, and I think a lot of athletes recognize that. Like I do think a lot of them and it is work. Like I don't want to,
yeah,
but it's pretty cool. But for them to recognize all of what goes into it is it's probably easy to forget, right? Like they're busy and that's really cool. So anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention? How do kids get into college at AU? No, I'm just kidding. What is the secret?
No, I mean, I feel like we covered a lot. I feel like, if you have any women that are like listening and just like unsure of speaking up or like advocating for themselves, I think, the biggest thing that I've learned over the years is this idea of like stand your ground.
Mhm.
My mentor, like Marcy, who I work games with, one of the things that she said um the first season I came on with the Wizards was like, don't let the guys bully you. Like, don't let them make you think that you made a mistake. So like if we ever had like a scoring discrepancy, like it was always like, don't let them make you believe that you're the one that made the mistake, because they very well could have been them on their end.
Mhm.
um and in general, she's always just been like, don't ever make anyone kind of make you feel like you don't deserve to be here. um and I know we've talked about that, but that I feel like that's such an important message for anyone
Yeah,
in any
I think
industry, really.
yeah, I mean, I think I love that message. I love not ceding your power. And, you, from a very brief conversation that we've had, it's so apparent that you're passionate about it, but passion only gets you so far. Like you have put in the time and the energy and practice, and you're really good at what you do. You wouldn't have had these experiences if you didn't. And own that. Like that's own that and don't question that. I mean, you've been doing this since you were 13, literally. And I think so many times we forget when you get to that next level, all of a sudden, I do it, we all do it, right? And you start questioning yourself. And I saw something the other day that was like, imposter syndrome is so funny that you're questioning yourself on something you're literally doing. I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, like, wait a minute. But I love that you also as a woman, and this is for anybody, but I will say, as a woman in college in your early 20s, you found your passion and it was about you. It wasn't external to like, I want to find someone to date or I want to spend my energy on these things. It's like, look at everything and where it's taken you, and the right people have supported you in your life. And I think that's just like such a beautiful thing. It's so easy to get distracted, and whatever it is, whether it's med school, whether it's whatever, like I just love your passion on it. Like you had the little fake the scoreboard that you could practice on. Like that's so awesome, right? So that's really cool. So what
my
advice? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, I was gonna say like my like dream game that I want to work has like nothing to do with any teams, but because there are female, like the NBA has female officials, they have never had a game where all three officials are female. And like my goal, I want to be working the game when that happens. Like I
That's
want
awesome.
that to be a Wizards game, because to like make NBA history, to make like NBA officiating history, but then to also be a female working the scorers table for that game, like that is, I cannot wait for that. And I
Yeah,
hope that that happens
it's gonna happen. It's
sooner
going to
rather
happen.
than later.
Have you been the first scorer or like
Not
female
the
scorer?
official score.
Mhm.
I so during the pandemic, so like one of the things that I've like mentally, when I started out with the Wizards, like one of my goals was I want them to know that I'm proficient at every task, because
Mhm.
again, this idea of like being a female, I am more valuable to them if I know every position versus coming in and being like, I am exclusively scoreboard. Don't put me
Mhm.
anywhere else. And there are people that I work with who are like, this is my sole job. I don't do anything else. And that limits you. And most of those people are men. But my mindset was always like, I want to come in and I want to say to them, I know how to do every job on this table. So it doesn't matter what game, move me around. And so
Mhm.
I would say, I think it was after the pandemic, when we did the season without fans. Um, I volunteered to learn how to do stats, because that was the one area of the table that I'd never, I watched them do it. I've seen it in college, and I was like, I think I can do this. And so, a couple of the guys trained me, and I did a couple like Mystics games, with them showing me how to do it. And then I was one of the secondary statisticians for one of our Wizards games, and I had learned it was after that game that I was the first female that they've had as a statistician on the scorers table.
Wow.
Um, and that it was really cool because that season we had Russell Westbrook on our team, and because we didn't have fans in the stands, he had this tradition of like after every game he would give his sneakers away, usually to like a young fan. And that season he would still give his sneakers away, but he gave it away to an employee of the arena. So it could be like an usher, security guard, or whatever. And it was that game that I did stats for the first time. I got his game worn sneakers after that game, which was like really cool. Yeah.
That is so cool. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool. Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to your younger self?
Um, Honestly, it would be kind of like what Marcy has told me, is
Hmm.
this idea of just like, you know, don't be afraid to stick up for yourself. Um, I am a firm believer of like seeing something, saying something, but like in the sports world, it's like if you notice that a mistake is being made, like it is better to stop a game and notify an official than to allow the possibility of a mistake happening.
Hmm.
Um, and I think, my younger self would have been like, just let it happen. It's not a big deal. And I think as I've grown and like worked so many games, like ethically, it's not right. There are, we're not supposed to impact a game. Like,
Hmm.
and people aren't supposed to know who we are. Like, we are supposed to be quiet in the background.
Hmm.
Um, but our jobs can impact the outcome of a game. A mistake that we make can impact the outcome of a game. And I have worked a game where I have seen that happen. And um, it it's a really interesting story, because it was while we were in Jamaica. Um, I was doing the book. I had nothing to do with like the clock or anything. We were working a game in Jamaica, and I was also the timeout coordinator because they were so short staffed. They needed someone to be on headset with the network, just to like communicate like what was happening in the game. And it was a 2-point game. There was less than like 3 seconds left on the clock. the team that was down by 2 had the ball. They had it in their front court. They had called timeout. We knew that like they were gonna run a play for either a game tying or a game winning basket. We resume play. They run a play for a 3-point shot. Basket goes in. They've won. They're celebrating. The whole team's out on the court. One of the things that I observed in that moment was that the game clock did not start when the ball was touched, that it started late. Referees didn't notice that. And anytime there's a game tying, game winning, last second basket made in college or the NBA, it has to be reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
So the referees come over to the monitor. The referee puts on a headset to talk to the network to kind of like run the replay for him. And because I'm on that headset as well, I told the referee, I was like, just so you know, I don't believe the clock started on time. You're going to want to look at the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, the clock did not start on time.
Mm-hmm.
And if it had been started at the, so what they did is when there's a clock discrepancy, you have to have a stopwatch at the table. And so what they did was they took the stopwatch and basically calculated how much time should have come off the clock when the ball was touched.
Mm-hmm.
And basically they determined that the basket was made when the clock was made after when the clock would have expired. And so the basket was no good. And the team that thought that won lost. And the game clock operator did not acknowledge their mistake, and he had walked off the court. It was our last night. Like he was getting
Oh my
the bus to
gosh.
head back to the hotel. And I'm sitting at the table. Every single coach on that team was chewing me out, screaming at me, like cussing me out. How could you guys make this mistake? Like, yelling at the referees, but like, it was the right call because it was something that I had observed.
Yeah.
And I had told them, like, just, I'm not telling you what to do. It was just heads.
No.
I think that this is what happened. You're going to want to look for this.
Yeah.
It was such a terrible like 20 minutes because they were livid, and I would be too if I was a coach. Like, I would be so upset. You thought you won on a game-winning basket and it didn't even count. Like that is the type of like mistake where the table can impact an outcome. Like that is a mistake you never want to make. The next day we came back because it was a tournament. So we came back the next day, and the referee from that game, he came up to me in the pregame and he gave me a hug, and he had brought me a bag of donuts, and he was like, I just want you to know that like I know that that was hard for you to tell us, but like that was the right thing because that, that wouldn't have won the game, and that would not have been right for them to win. Every time I see that referee now since that trip, he will tell me like every year when we go through training, I bring up that story. I tell them, like that's how you can utilize your scorers table to help you sometimes. But every time I see him now, he like always comes over, he always gives me a hug, and he's like, I still talk about that game in Jamaica. Like, but like
Yeah.
that, like that's a perfect example of just like how important the work that we do is, and like why it's important to be serious. Like, we're not supposed to have our phones on the table. Like we're supposed to be kind of like distraction free. And he was on his phone, like he wasn't paying attention when the ball, went into play.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like, yeah, that's
I feel sick listening to you because it is the right thing to do, but you know what's coming. And then
yeah,
you had to, and
yeah,
that's not to say that the ref wouldn't have noticed it. There's a reason why they do the replay, like all of that, but you knew what you knew
yeah.
and to not share it.
On our bus ride back to the airport, we ended up on the same bus as that losing team. And the coach, he came up to me on the bus and like he apologized. He's like, I just want you to know, like, it was nothing personal
Of
about like
course.
me yelling at you. And he was like, it was in the heat of the moment, like we were upset. And I was like, I completely understand. Like, and I was like, I never wanted to do anything intentional, you know, for you guys, but like it was the right call.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it was very nice for him to like come and apologize. And I don't know if it was like he saw me on the bus. I don't think I would have gotten an apology otherwise. But I think it was like, oh yeah, there's that woman that we chewed out the other night.
Yeah.
Like,
But he, to his credit, he took the opportunity. He could have just let you walk by and act like he didn't know, you know?
our game clock guy, I didn't talk to him the next day. I was so mad at him. I was like, dude, that was so unprofessional for you to have walked off and that was your mistake that you made and I got all the heat for it.
Yeah.
Like I literally gave him the cold shoulder the next day. I was so mad.
Good. You're like, you're not getting any of my donuts.
Yeah. No. So
So, what do
yeah.
you love most about this?
Honestly, I think it's good basketball. Like the level of basketball is fantastic and to be able to see players like in college, the ones that, you know, most of the teams I work for, they're not teams that kind of breed one and done athletes and so you see them develop year after year and so to be able to like to watch a player play throughout their college career and then see them be successful in the NBA, I think is like really rewarding. And like they have no idea who I am. And
Yeah.
but it's just like this idea, like when I was at American, CJ McCollum was playing at Lehigh. So like every year when we would play Lehigh, I would see CJ McCollum twice a year. And to be able to see, you know, Lehigh upset Duke that year in the NCAA tournament, to see CJ get drafted number 9 in the draft, and then to see him still in the NBA now, like doing his like that is I love that. There are so many players that I've seen in college to see that like you know, Zion Williamson, Mo Wagner, you know, Anthony Gill, Malcolm Brogdon, like to see those guys and say like I worked some of your college games and like see the players that they are now and like the notoriety that they have to me is like a really cool full circle moment.
Yeah.
Um, the other part's the atmosphere. Like
Yeah.
if these games didn't have a fun atmosphere, I probably would be less interested in working them. Like the college atmosphere, the bands, I love the bands.
Me too.
Yeah, like the school pride, the team pride is so different college to NBA. Like
Yeah.
fans in college, I love them so much more. Like those games are so much fun to work because those kids like live, eat, and breathe their school. You know, it's so like when you watch the NCAA tournament and like they cut to the kids crying in the stands and you're just like, oh my
I know.
God. That part of it I love. Um, and then like the people I work with, like I love our table at the Wizards. I love our table at Georgetown. Like a lot of us have been working games for so long. Most of the people I've worked with have been working them longer than I have, but like
Hmm.
in its core, like we are all like a really very cool bunch of people and we all do very different things for our day jobs and
Yeah.
um it's like that part of it is a lot of fun that like I enjoy the coworkers that I'm around. I mean, we see each other several nights a week. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so grateful for you sharing this experience that you've had and the details around it. Like I it's one of those roles that's so hugely important that until I met you, I never thought about.
yeah.
Right? Like you just don't think about it. Like I didn't think about it as a player, and I didn't think player, by the way, like stop playing in eighth grade. But like
Still a
you don't think
player.
about it, and then as a fan, didn't think about it. Like you see them there, you don't think about it.
No.
And for you to share all this experience, it's like getting into this little universe. It's so cool. So thank you so much. And if people want to follow you
Yeah.
or find you, how can they do that? And how can they sign up for a tour at AU?
Well, you can literally just Google search me and email me through my AU email. And yeah, if you ever want to come do a college visit, let me know. But most people can just find me on Instagram. My
Mhm,
Instagram handle is just T and then my last name.
mhm.
And most of the content I post on my Instagram is like basketball
Yeah.
related. One of the things that I'm doing this season is like keeping track of the number of games I work, but
Mhm.
I'm also keeping on my notes app the wins and losses of every game I work so that at the end of the season this season I can see like what my record was for winning games I worked versus losing games I worked. Right now it's a little losing heavy. But yeah, you can most like Instagram would be the best way, and then LinkedIn also. I feel like
Cool.
there's people that find me on LinkedIn and like reach out about how do I talk, break into do
Yeah.
scorekeeping and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so
yeah,
much. This was really, really fun.
this was awesome. I'm so glad like I got to chat with you. We got to catch up,
I
and
know.
we got to shed light on something that a lot of people don't know about. So
Yeah,
this has been so
absolutely.
wonderful.
It's shed light on something and your passion is just palpable. It makes me so happy. I'm so proud of you. Just like it's so great. So awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.